My mother-in-law burned my passport in front of me just before our family trip, but she started shaking when she realized what she had done. The flames ate through the blue cover in seconds. Evangeline stood frozen, holding the lighter like it might bite her. "There," she said, but her voice cracked. "Now you can't ruin everything." I stared at the ashes on her kitchen floor. We were supposed to fly to Prague in 4 hours. Theodore was already loading the car, humming off-key while our daughter packed her stuffed elephant. "You're insane," I whispered. She dropped the lighter. It clattered against the marble, the sound echoing through her perfect kitchen. "I had to. You don't understand what you were walking into. A vacation? With my family? No." Her hands trembled as she backed away from the burning remains. A trap. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. This wasn't her usual drama about me stealing her precious son. Her face had gone ash gray, and sweat beaded on her forehead despite the air conditioning. "What are you talking about?" "The travel agent. Delphine Kovac. She's not who she claims to be." Evangeline gripped the counter. "I hired a private investigator after she contacted us about the trip. The discounted family package to Prague was too good to be true." My blood chilled. The vacation had been Evangeline's idea. A surprise gift to celebrate our anniversary. All expenses paid, luxury hotels, private tours. Who is she? My dead husband's business partner, the one who disappeared after embezzling $2 million from their company 15 years ago. Her voice shook. The one who swore she'd destroy everything I loved before vanishing. I felt the room spin. "Your husband died in a car accident." Delphine cut his brake lines. Evangeline's composure completely shattered. I could never prove it, but I knew. She blamed him for the FBI investigation that exposed her money laundering operation. She pulled out her phone with trembling fingers, showing me a news article from 2009. The headline read, "Czech national wanted for financial crimes linked to organized crime." The photo showed a younger woman with different hair, but the eyes were unmistakable. Our travel agent. "She's been planning this for years, getting close to us, learning our routines, our daughter's schedule." Evangeline's voice turned desperate. "The Prague hotel? It doesn't exist. I called this morning. The confirmation numbers are fake." My mouth went dry. Then where were we supposed to go? "I don't know, but my investigator found shipping manifests. Delphine's been moving cargo containers through Eastern Europe. Human trafficking, he thinks." The kitchen felt like it was closing in. "You could have just told us." "Why burn my passport?" "Because Theodore wouldn't have believed me. He thinks I'm paranoid since the diagnosis." She touched her temple. "Early onset dementia. Stage 1. No one takes my warning seriously anymore." That's when I heard the front door slam. "Mom, where is everyone?" Theodore's voice echoed from the entryway. "Delphine's outside. She says there's been a change of plans. We need to leave immediately." Evangeline grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. She knows I figured it out. That's why she's here early. Through the kitchen window, I saw a black sedan idling in the driveway. 2 men sat in the front seats, and neither looked like airline representatives. "Mom?" Theodore called again, footsteps approaching the kitchen. Evangeline pressed something cold into my palm. A burner phone. "Speed dial 1 reaches Agent Morrison at the FBI. Tell him Delphine Kovac resurfaced." Her eyes were wild but lucid. "Speed dial 2 reaches my investigator. He has all the evidence." The kitchen door started to open. "Whatever happens next," she whispered urgently, "don't let them take our granddaughter." Theodore walked in, his face bright with excitement that immediately crumbled when he saw the ashes on the floor and our terrified expressions. "What happened here?" He looked between us, confused. "Mom, why do you look like you've seen a ghost?" Before Evangeline could answer, the front doorbell rang. Not the cheerful chime we were used to, but a harsh, insistent buzzing that seemed to go on forever. "That's probably Delphine," Theodore said, starting toward the door. "She said something about needing to verify our documents before—" "Don't answer it." Evangeline's voice cut through the air like a blade. Theodore stopped, his hand on the doorframe. "Mom, what's wrong with you? We're already running late." The burner phone felt heavy in my palm. Through the window, I watched one of the men from the sedan get out and walk toward our house. He moved with the predatory grace of someone accustomed to violence. "Theodore," I said carefully, "your mom needs to tell you something important about this trip. Can it wait until we're in the air?" He checked his watch. "Delphine said the charter leaves at—" "There is no charter." Evangeline's words hit him like a physical blow. The doorbell stopped ringing. In the sudden silence, we heard footsteps moving around the side of the house toward the back door. "Mom, you're scaring me." Theodore's voice had gone small, like a child's. "What do you mean there's no charter? The woman you think is our travel agent is named Delphine Kovac. She killed your father." I watched my husband's face cycle through confusion, disbelief, and finally, a dawning horror as Evangeline quickly explained everything she'd told me. The embezzlement, the brake lines, the fake vacation that was really an elaborate kidnapping scheme. "But that's impossible," he whispered. "Dad died in an accident, the police said." "The police found what they were meant to find." Evangeline moved to the window and peered through the blinds. She's very good at making things look like accidents. A soft tapping came from the back door. Not knocking, probing. Someone was testing whether it was locked. "Where's Ophelia?" I asked suddenly, realizing our 5-year-old daughter hadn't come down to find us. "In her room, packing." Theodore's voice was hollow. She was so excited about seeing the castle. The tapping stopped. Then we heard the unmistakable sound of glass breaking from the back patio. "They're inside," Evangeline breathed. I gripped the burner phone tighter. "I'm calling the FBI." "No time." She grabbed a butcher knife from the block on the counter. "They'll be here in seconds." Heavy footsteps moved through the house below us. Multiple people spreading out systematically. "The panic room," Evangeline whispered. "Behind the bookshelf in my study." We crept toward the back stairs but froze when we heard Delphine's voice echoing from the foyer. "Evangeline, darling, I know you're here, and I know you've figured out who I am." Her accent was thicker now, more pronounced. 15 years is a long time to wait for revenge, but some things are worth savoring. Theodore grabbed my hand, his palms slick with sweat. We could hear more footsteps, at least 3 sets, moving through the house. "I have to get Ophelia," I whispered. No, Evangeline hissed. Too dangerous. But I was already moving, slipping out of the kitchen and up the back stairs. Every creak of the old wood sounded like a gunshot in the silence. Ophelia's room was at the end of the hall. I could hear her humming to herself as she packed her favorite dolls. The normalcy of it made my chest tight. I pushed open her door. She looked up with a brilliant smile. Mama, I can't decide if I should bring Rosalind or Beatrice. Which one do you think would like Prague better? Both, I said, scooping her up along with her stuffed elephant. We're playing a new game. We have to be very, very quiet. Her eyes widened with excitement. Like hide and seek? Exactly like hide and seek. I carried her to the window overlooking the side yard. No men visible. But that didn't mean they weren't there. The drop to the garden was too far anyway. Footsteps in the hallway, coming closer. I pressed myself against the wall beside the door. Ophelia clutched to my chest. Her small hand covered my mouth. She thought we were still playing. Check every room, Delphine's voice carried from the stairway. The old woman is here somewhere. And the family. The footsteps paused outside Ophelia's door. I held my breath, feeling my daughter's heartbeat against my ribs. The door handle turned slowly. Then from downstairs came the sound of something heavy crashing, yelling. The footsteps in the hall moved rapidly toward the noise. Fire! Kitchen fire! Theodore's voice boomed through the house. Smoke was already beginning to seep under the bedroom door. Whatever Evangeline had set ablaze was spreading fast. I ran to the window and yanked it open. The roof of the garage was about 8 feet below. Doable if I was careful. We're going on an adventure, I whispered to Ophelia. Hold on tight. I lowered myself out the window, dangling for a moment before dropping onto the garage roof. The shingles were slick with morning dew, but I managed to keep my footing. That was fun, Mama, Ophelia giggled softly. From there, it was an easy climb down the trellis to the backyard. But as my feet hit the ground, I found myself staring at the barrel of a gun. The man holding it was massive, with scars crisscrossing his neck like he'd survived having his throat cut. He smiled when he saw Ophelia. Delphine will be so pleased, he said in accented English. I pulled Ophelia behind me. What do you want? Justice. Your husband's family owes a debt. His finger tightened on the trigger. 15 years of interest makes it quite expensive. Please, she's just a child. Children suffer for their parents' sins. This is the way of the world. That's when the burner phone in my pocket rang. The man's eyes flicked toward the sound, confused. In that split second of distraction, I threw myself sideways, clutching Ophelia as we rolled behind the garden shed. The gunshot was deafeningly loud. Wood exploded from the shed wall inches from my head. Run! I whispered to Ophelia, pushing her toward the neighbor's yard. Run to Mrs. Patterson's house and don't stop. She hesitated, tears streaming down her face. Go! Now! She bolted across the yard like a scared rabbit. The gunman tracked her movement, raising his weapon. I tackled him from behind. We went down in a tangle of limbs, the gun skittering across the patio stones. He was stronger, but I had desperation fueling me. I clawed at his eyes, bit his hand when he tried to cover my mouth. He backhanded me hard enough to see stars, then reached for the gun. I grabbed a garden trowel from the nearby flower bed and drove it into his shoulder with all my strength. He screamed and rolled away, clutching the wound. Blood soaked through his shirt. I snatched up the gun, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold it. Stay down, I panted. He laughed, the sound wet and horrible. You think this ends here? Delphine has been planning this for 15 years. Your husband's family destroyed everything she loved. Now she returns the favor. Smoke was pouring from the house now. I could hear sirens in the distance. Fire trucks, maybe police. What did his family do to her? Your father-in-law and Delphine were lovers, business partners. Until he decided she was becoming too reckless with the money laundering operation, the man struggled to sit up, wincing. He betrayed her to the FBI to save himself. My blood ran cold. That's not true. She loved him, trusted him. When the FBI raided her operation, she lost everything. Her business, her freedom, her identity. His smile was vicious. So, she took his life. And now she takes his legacy. The sirens were getting closer, but they weren't just fire trucks. I could hear the distinctive wail of police cars and what sounded like federal vehicles. The burner phone rang again. This time I answered. This is Agent Morrison. Are you the caller requesting assistance with Delphine Kovac? Yes, I gasped. She's here, at 1247 Elm Street. She's got my family. We're 2 minutes out. Is anyone injured? I looked at the bleeding man on the ground, then at the smoke billowing from the house. I don't know. There's a fire. My husband and mother-in-law are still inside. Emergency services are en route. Stay on the line and get to a safe location. My daughter, we have her. She's safe with neighbors. Relief nearly dropped me to my knees. The front door of the house burst open. Theodore stumbled out, coughing violently, supporting Evangeline, who was clutching a laptop bag. Behind them came Delphine. She looked nothing like the polished travel agent who had visited our home 3 weeks ago. Her hair was singed, her business suit torn and blackened with smoke, but her eyes were alert and calculating. She had a gun pressed to the back of Theodore's neck. Drop your weapon, she called out when she spotted me in the backyard. Let them go. I don't think so. She pressed the gun harder against my husband's spine. You've already cost me one of my men and my perfect plan. A convoy of black SUVs roared onto our street, followed by fire trucks and ambulances. The cavalry had arrived, but it might be too late. The FBI is here, I said. It's over. Delphine laughed bitterly. You think I didn't plan for this possibility? I've been watching this family for years. I know every escape route, every hiding place. She dragged Theodore and Evangeline toward the side gate that led to the alley behind our house, where another car was undoubtedly waiting. Your grandfather was a weak man, she called to me as they moved. He promised me everything, then threw me away when I became inconvenient. But I learned from that mistake. He wasn't weak, Evangeline gasped. He was trying to protect his family from what you'd become. What I became? Delphine's voice cracked with old pain. I became a criminal because of him. He introduced me to the money laundering operation. He taught me how to move dirty money through shell companies. Then, when it got too hot, he made me the scapegoat. They reached the gate. FBI agents were surrounding the house, but they didn't have a clear shot. The difference between your grandfather and me, Delphine continued, is that I keep my promises. I promised I would destroy his legacy. Today, I fulfilled that promise. She yanked open the gate with one hand while keeping the gun trained on Theodore with the other. That's when Evangeline made her move. Despite being 73 and having early dementia, she spun around and drove her elbow into Delphine's solar plexus with surprising force. The gun went off, the bullet shattering the fence post inches from Theodore's head. Evangeline and Delphine went down in a heap, struggling for control of the weapon. "Get away from them!" an FBI agent shouted. Theodore scrambled clear just as the two women rolled across the ground, both hands wrapped around the gun. I ran toward them, but Agent Morrison grabbed my arm. "Let my people handle this." A single gunshot echoed through the yard. Both women went still. For a horrible moment, I couldn't tell who had been shot. Then Evangeline pushed herself up, gasping but unhurt. Delphine lay motionless beneath her, a spreading pool of blood soaking into the grass. "Is she dead?" I whispered. Agent Morrison knelt beside Delphine, checking for a pulse. "Yeah, she's done." I sank to my knees, the adrenaline finally leaving my system. Theodore wrapped his arms around me, both of us shaking. "How did you know to come?" I asked Morrison. He nodded toward Evangeline, who was being checked by paramedics. "She called us 2 days ago. Said she suspected her family was being targeted by a wanted fugitive. We've been watching the house since yesterday." "Then why didn't you stop this sooner?" "We needed to catch her in the act. Delphine Kovac has been a ghost for 15 years. This was our only chance to end it permanently." I felt sick. "You used us as bait." "We kept your family safe," Morrison said firmly. "Your daughter never left our sight. We had agents positioned throughout the neighborhood." "What about the fire?" Theodore managed a weak smile. "Mom's idea. She doused the kitchen curtains with cooking oil and lit them up when those men came inside. Created enough chaos for you to escape with Ophelia." I looked at Evangeline, who was arguing with the paramedics about whether she needed to go to the hospital. "She saved us. She's been protecting this family for 15 years. Morrison said. "Everything she did, the private investigator, the Dementia Act, even burning your passport, was calculated to keep you alive until we could move in." Dementia Act. Stage 1 dementia was a cover story. Made Delphine underestimate her. Made her family dismiss her warnings as paranoia. Morrison smiled grimly. "Your mother-in-law is sharp as a tack. She's been working with us since 2018. My head spun. "Working with you how?" "Delphine surfaced 4 years ago. Started making inquiries about your husband's family." Evangeline noticed unusual activity. Someone going through the family's financial records. Strange cars in the neighborhood. Questions being asked about your daughter's school schedule. Theodore's arms tightened around me. Mom never said anything. Because Delphine had demonstrated she was willing to kill to get what she wanted. The fewer people who knew about the FBI involvement, the safer everyone would be. A paramedic approached us. "Ma'am, you should be checked for smoke inhalation." "I'm fine. You're bleeding." I looked down and saw that my hands were scraped raw from the fight in the garden. There was a cut on my forehead I didn't remember getting. Suddenly, everything hurt. At the hospital, Theodore and I sat in the waiting room while Evangeline was treated for smoke inhalation and minor burns. Ophelia was with my sister, who had driven over the moment she heard about the incident on the news. "I can't believe Mom knew this whole time," Theodore said. "All these years, I thought she was just being paranoid about security. The alarm system, the private investigator, insisting we keep irregular schedules. She was protecting us, by lying to us, by sacrificing her own credibility to keep us alive." I took his hand. "Do you have any idea what that must have cost her? Letting her own son think she was losing her mind?" A doctor emerged from the treatment area. "Mrs. Evangeline is asking for you both. We found her in a private room, oxygen mask around her neck, laptop bag clutched in her arms like a shield." "The evidence," she said without preamble. "Morrison needs to see it." She opened the laptop bag and pulled out a thick folder stuffed with documents, photographs, and what looked like a portable hard drive. 4 years of surveillance. Every contact Delphine made, every identity she used, every financial transaction. Evangeline's voice was hoarse from the smoke. She made one critical mistake. "What's that?" She got impatient. "The original plan was probably to take you overseas where she could disappear you permanently. But when I started asking questions about the travel agency, she panicked and moved up the timeline." Theodore sat heavily in the visitor's chair. "I still don't understand why Dad never told us about her." "Because he was ashamed." Evangeline's eyes filled with tears. "He genuinely loved her, you know, before she became what she became. He tried to save her from herself, but she'd already crossed too many lines. The money laundering started small, cleaning profits from a few restaurants, some construction contracts. But Delphine was ambitious. Within 2 years, she was moving money for arms dealers and human traffickers." Evangeline wiped her eyes. "Your father realized what she'd become and tried to extract himself from the operation, so she killed him for it. She killed him because he chose his family over her." Evangeline's voice turned bitter. In her mind, that betrayal deserved death. Agent Morrison appeared in the doorway. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Evangeline?" "Like I've been holding my breath for 15 years and can finally exhale." Morrison smiled. "We found the rest of her operation. 6 warehouses in 3 states. We're still processing the crime scenes, but it looks like you were right about the human trafficking. What would have happened to us if we'd gotten on that plane? Best case scenario? You would have been held for ransom to force Mrs. Evangeline to turn over her late husband's hidden assets. Worst case?" Morrison's expression darkened. "Delphine's operations specialized in making people disappear permanently, especially people who had something she wanted." I felt nauseated. "Our daughter would have been leverage. Children are very effective at ensuring compliance." Theodore stood up abruptly and walked to the window. His shoulders were shaking. "The Prague hotel reservations," I said. "Were they completely fake? The hotel exists, but your reservations were never confirmed. You would have been taken to a private airfield instead, then transported to a facility we haven't identified yet." Morrison consulted his notes. "We're working with international authorities to map the rest of her network. How many other families were targeted? Unknown, but Delphine kept meticulous records. Your mother-in-law's cooperation has given us enough evidence to potentially solve dozens of missing persons cases." I looked at Evangeline with new respect. "You've been fighting her all alone this whole time." "Not alone. I had help." She managed a small smile. "Your grandfather may have made terrible choices, but he wasn't stupid. Before he died, he left me detailed records of Delphine's operation and clear instructions for what to do if she ever surfaced again. He knew she'd come back. He knew she'd never forgive him for choosing his family over her criminal empire. So he made sure his family would be protected. A knock at the door interrupted us. A hospital social worker entered, followed by my sister and a very subdued Ophelia. "Mama!" My daughter ran to me, her stuffed elephant clutched in her arms. "The nice lady said you were playing hide and seek with some bad people. Did you win?" "We won, sweetheart." "Good. Can we still go on vacation?" I really wanted to see a castle. I exchanged glances with Theodore and Evangeline. "Maybe somewhere a little closer to home this time." "Disney World has castles," Ophelia said hopefully. "Disney World sounds perfect." Morrison cleared his throat. "I hate to interrupt, but we'll need formal statements from all of you. And Mrs. Evangeline, there's the matter of your federal witness protection placement." "What?" Theodore spun around. "Witness protection? Delphine's network is extensive. While she was the primary threat, there may be others seeking revenge for her death. It's just a precaution. For how long? 6 months, maybe a year? Until we're certain the threat has been neutralized." I felt the weight of our new reality settling over me. Our house was a crime scene. Our identities would have to change. Everything we'd built together would have to be rebuilt from scratch. But we were alive. Our daughter was safe. And the woman who had murdered my father-in-law was finally dead. "Where would we go?" Theodore asked. "We have a family-friendly facility in Colorado. Mountain views, excellent schools, full security detail until the all-clear is given." "Mountains sound nice," Evangeline said quietly. "I've always wanted to see the Rockies." 3 months later, we were living in a modest cabin outside Aspen under the names David and Elena Fletcher. Ophelia was thriving in her new school, blissfully unaware that her grandparents were anything other than David and Elena Fletcher Sr. Evangeline had begun writing a memoir about her years fighting Delphine's organization. Agent Morrison said it would be invaluable for training future investigators. The cabin had a spectacular view of snow-capped peaks and a stone fireplace where we spent our evenings playing board games and reading to Ophelia. It was nothing like our old life, but it was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced before. On a particularly clear morning in November, I found Evangeline on the back porch, wrapped in a blanket and staring at the mountains. "Having second thoughts about witness protection?" I asked, settling into the chair beside her. "No, just thinking about choices." "What kind of choices?" "The ones your grandfather made, the ones I made, the ones Delphine made." She pulled the blanket tighter. "We all started from the same place, people who loved someone and wanted to protect them. But you chose differently. I chose family. She chose revenge." Evangeline's breath misted in the cold air. In the end, that made all the difference. Agent Morrison's SUV pulled into our driveway, as it did every Tuesday for our weekly check-in. "Good news, I hope," I called out as he approached the porch. "The best. We've dismantled the last of Delphine's operation. 3 arrests in Budapest, 2 in Miami, and enough evidence to prosecute the whole network." He smiled. "You're officially free to resume your lives. All of us, all of you. New identities if you want them, or you can reclaim your old ones. Your choice." I looked at Evangeline, then back at the mountains. "Can we think about it? Take all the time you need. You've earned some peace." That evening, Theodore and I walked along the river that ran behind our cabin. The water was partially frozen, creating intricate ice formations that caught the last light of the sunset. "What do you think?" he asked. "Go back to our old life, or start fresh? What does your mom want?" "She says it's our decision, but I think she likes it here. She's been talking about buying a small place in town, opening a consulting business for families dealing with stalking situations. She'd be good at that. She saved our lives. Multiple times." Theodore stopped walking and turned to face me. "I owe her an apology. All those years I thought she was being paranoid. She let you think that to protect us." "I know, but still." He kicked at a chunk of ice. "I should have trusted her instincts. You couldn't have known. I could have listened better, paid attention to the things that didn't add up." We continued walking in comfortable silence. In the distance, Ophelia's laughter echoed from the cabin where she was playing with her grandmother. "I want to stay," I said suddenly. "Here?" "Yes. I want Ophelia to grow up somewhere she can run freely without us worrying about who might be watching. I want to build something new, even if it means starting over completely, especially because it means starting over completely." Theodore smiled and took my hand. "Then we stay." When we returned to the cabin, we found Evangeline teaching Ophelia how to play chess on an antique set Agent Morrison had brought as a goodbye gift. "Checkmate, Grandmama," Ophelia announced proudly. "Excellent strategy, darling. You're a natural." "Are we staying here forever?" Ophelia asked, looking up at us with bright eyes. "Would you like that?" "Yes, I love my new school, and Mrs. Patterson promised to teach me how to ski, and there's a family of deer that comes to eat from our bird feeder every morning." "Then we're staying," Theodore said. Evangeline smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. I already put a deposit down on a little house in town. Without asking us? I'm 73 years old. I don't have time to wait for young people to make up their minds." 6 months later, we opened a small consulting firm specializing in personal security for families. Evangeline handled the psychological profiling and threat assessment. Theodore managed the technology and surveillance systems. I focused on family counseling and crisis intervention. Our first client was a woman whose ex-husband had hired a private investigator to track her movements after their divorce. Our second was a family being stalked by their teenage daughter's former boyfriend. Word spread quickly through the community that the Fletcher Family Security Services could handle situations the police couldn't touch. Ophelia started first grade at the local elementary school. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, said she had a natural gift for problem solving and leadership. She also made friends easily and showed no lingering trauma from the events that had brought us to Colorado. On the anniversary of Delphine's death, Agent Morrison called to tell us that the last members of her network had been sentenced. 23 people in total, operating across 4 countries. The investigation had led to the rescue of over 40 victims of human trafficking and the recovery of millions in stolen assets. "None of it would have been possible without your family's cooperation," he said, "especially Mrs. Evangeline's documentation. She'll be pleased to hear that." "How is she doing?" Better than ever, she just won a contract to train FBI personnel on long-term surveillance detection. I'm not surprised. She's remarkable. That evening, we celebrated with dinner at our favorite restaurant in town. Ophelia insisted on ordering the most expensive item on the menu, lobster ravioli, because it was a special occasion. What are we celebrating exactly? Theodore asked. Survival, Evangeline said simply. And the family we chose to be instead of the one we were forced to be. What's the difference? Ophelia wanted to know. The family we were forced to be was shaped by fear and secrets, I explained. The family we chose to be is shaped by honesty and love. I like our chosen family better. So do I, sweetheart. So do I. As we walked home through the quiet streets of our small town, I reflected on the strange turns our lives had taken. A year ago, I was a suburban housewife, whose biggest worry was whether Ophelia would get into the right preschool. Now I was helping other families navigate threats I never could have imagined. But more importantly, I had learned that family isn't just about blood relations or shared histories. It's about the people who will fight for you when your back is against the wall. It's about the sacrifices people make to keep you safe, even when those sacrifices cost them everything. Evangeline had given up her reputation, her credibility, and her relationship with her son to protect us from a threat we didn't even know existed. That kind of love doesn't come from obligation or guilt. It comes from choice. And every day, we choose each other all over again. 3 years later, Fletcher Family Security Services had expanded to include a team of 12 specialists. We handled cases across the western United States, working closely with law enforcement and federal agencies to protect families from stalkers, kidnappers, and other predators. Ophelia was now 8 years old and had developed her grandmother's talent for reading people. She could spot a liar from across a room and had an uncanny ability to sense when someone was hiding something important. She's going to be trouble when she's a teenager, Evangeline observed one afternoon, as we watched Ophelia interrogate a new client's son about his suspicious bruises. The good kind of trouble, I replied. The best kind. Our latest case involved a family whose teenage daughter had disappeared while walking home from school. The police suspected she was a runaway, but the parents insisted something more sinister had happened. After 3 days of investigation, Ophelia made an observation that cracked the case wide open. The man in the parking lot, she said during our evening family meeting. He's wearing the same cologne as the dad, but different shoes every day. Theodore looked confused. What does that mean? It means he's not homeless like he's pretending to be, I said, understanding immediately. Homeless people don't change shoes daily, but they might use familiar scents to blend into their environment. He's been watching the family, Evangeline added, learning their routines. We passed the information to the police, who arrested the man 2 hours later. He led them to the missing girl, who was being held in a storage unit 20 miles away. That night, as we tucked Ophelia into bed, she asked a question that stopped me cold. Mama, are we the good guys? What do you mean, sweetheart? In the stories, are we the good guys who save people? Or are we something else? I thought about Delphine, who had convinced herself she was the hero of her own story, about all the choices that had led our family to this mountain cabin and this new life. We try to be the good guys, I said finally. But more importantly, we try to be the people who help other people be safe and happy. That sounds like good guys to me. I think so too. After she fell asleep, Theodore and I sat on the porch watching the stars. The night was clear and cold, and the mountains stood like silent guardians around our valley. Do you ever miss our old life? He asked. Which part? The part where we were being hunted by international criminals? Or the part where we were completely oblivious to the danger we were in? The part where things were simple. Things were never simple. We just didn't know how complicated they really were. Fair point. A shooting star streaked across the sky, and I made a wish for continued peace and safety for all the families we'd helped over the years. What did you wish for? Theodore asked. That Ophelia gets to grow up in a world where she never has to use the skills we're teaching her. And if she does have to use them, then I wish we're teaching her the right ones. 5 years had passed since that terrifying day when Evangeline burned my passport and changed our lives forever. Ophelia was now 10 years old and had announced her intention to become either a detective or a veterinarian, depending on whether she decided people or animals needed more help. Our business had evolved into a nonprofit organization that provided security consulting and family counseling services to anyone who needed them, regardless of their ability to pay. We'd helped over 200 families navigate various threats and had achieved a 100% success rate in keeping our clients safe. Evangeline had published her memoir, titled The Long Game: How I Spent 15 Years Hunting a Killer. It became a bestseller and was optioned for a movie. She donated all the proceeds to organizations that help families of missing persons. The house we'd built in town had become a community gathering place where families could come for support, children could learn safety skills, and law enforcement officers could train in specialized techniques for family protection cases. On a warm spring morning, I was in the garden teaching Ophelia how to identify edible plants when Agent Morrison's car pulled into our driveway. He didn't visit often anymore, but when he did, it usually meant something significant. "Morning, Elena," he called out, using the name I'd kept even after we were cleared to resume our original identities. "Beautiful day." "Every day is beautiful when you're not being hunted by criminals," I replied. "Coffee? Please." We settled on the porch while Ophelia continued her botanical exploration. Morrison looked older than his years, the stress of his job evident in the lines around his eyes. "What brings you to our mountain paradise?" "Good news, actually. The last of Delphine's financial network has been dismantled. Her accounts in the Cayman Islands, Switzerland, and Singapore have all been seized, and the funds redistributed to victims' families. How much was recovered? $37 million, plus properties in 6 countries and a collection of stolen art worth another $12 million. I whistled softly. She was more successful than we thought. She was also more vicious. The final tally shows she was responsible for at least 23 murders over a 15-year period, including my father-in-law. Including your father-in-law. Morrison sipped his coffee. But there's something else. Something I thought you should know before it becomes public. My stomach tightened. What is it? Delphine had a daughter, 26 years old, raised in Prague by her grandmother. She's been trying to contact your family. The coffee cup nearly slipped from my hands. Contact us how? Letters, phone calls, emails, all intercepted by our security monitoring system. But she's persistent. What does she want? To apologize. Apparently her grandmother told her the truth about her mother when she turned 18. She's been carrying guilt about Delphine's crimes ever since. Is she a threat? We don't think so. She's a social worker, married, 2 young children. By all accounts, she's the opposite of her mother. But she feels responsible for the pain Delphine caused. I called for Theodore and Evangeline. They needed to hear this. When Morrison had finished explaining the situation, we sat in stunned silence for several minutes. What do you think? I asked Evangeline. I think children shouldn't be punished for their parents' sins, she said quietly. But I also think we have the right to protect our peace. Could we meet her somewhere neutral? Theodore suggested. With security present? That could be arranged, Morrison said. She's actually in the United States right now. She came here specifically to try to reach out to your family. Where? Denver. She's been staying at a hotel for 3 weeks, hoping we'd agree to facilitate contact. I looked at Ophelia, who was listening with the serious expression she got when adults were discussing important things. What do you think, sweetheart? Should we meet the daughter of the bad lady? Is she a bad lady too? We don't know. That's why we'd meet her. To find out. Ophelia considered this carefully. Grandmama always says people can choose to be different from their family. That's true. Then maybe we should give her a chance to choose. 3 days later, we met Delphine's daughter, Clara, at a small restaurant in Denver. Morrison and 2 other agents sat at nearby tables, and Evangeline had insisted on having a security consultant from our team present as well. Clara looked nothing like her mother. Where Delphine had been sharp and calculating, Clara was soft and gentle. She was clearly nervous, her hands shaking as she showed us pictures of her own children. I know this is difficult, she began in lightly accented English, but I had to try to make some kind of amends for what my mother did to your family. You weren't responsible for your mother's choices, Evangeline said kindly, but I am responsible for mine, and I choose to acknowledge the harm she caused. Clara's eyes filled with tears. She took your husband and father away from you. She terrorized your family for years. Nothing I do can undo that, but I wanted you to know that not everyone in her family supported what she became. What was she like when you were young? Ophelia asked suddenly. Clara smiled sadly. I thought she was wonderful. She would visit Prague every few months and bring me beautiful gifts and tell me stories about her business success in America. I was so proud of her. When did you learn the truth? My 18th birthday. My grandmother couldn't bear the secret anymore. She told me everything. The crimes, the murders, the reason we had to live under false names. How did that make you feel? Devastated. Ashamed. Angry that I'd loved someone who was capable of such terrible things. Clara wiped her eyes. I've spent the last 8 years in therapy, trying to understand how someone could compartmentalize love and violence so completely. We talked for 2 hours. Clara told us about her work with refugee children, her husband who was a teacher, her determination to use her mother's blood money, which she'd inherited and immediately donated to victims' rights organizations, to help people, instead of harm them. By the end of the conversation, even Evangeline seemed convinced that Clara posed no threat to our family. Would you like to exchange contact information? I asked as we prepared to leave. Clara looked surprised. You would trust me with that? You came here to apologize for something that wasn't your fault. You donated millions of dollars that could have made your life comfortable to help your mother's victims instead. You've spent 8 years trying to atone for crimes you didn't commit? I smiled. Those aren't the actions of someone we need to fear. Thank you. She handed me a card with her information. If you ever need anything, if there are other victims who need help, please let me know. It's the least I can do. On the drive home, Ophelia asked why people sometimes chose to be bad when they could choose to be good. I don't think it starts with choosing to be bad, Evangeline said thoughtfully. I think it starts with choosing to be selfish. Then each selfish choice makes the next one easier, until eventually you're doing terrible things and convincing yourself they're justified. How do you avoid that? By remembering that your choices affect other people. By asking yourself before you do something whether it will make the world a little better or a little worse. And if it makes the world worse, then you choose differently. 2 years later, Clara visited us in Colorado with her family. Her children played with Ophelia in our garden while the adults shared stories and meals. Her husband was indeed a teacher, a kind, patient man who clearly adored his wife and children. Clara had continued her work with refugees and had started a foundation to help children whose parents were incarcerated for violent crimes. She said meeting our family had inspired her to expand her mission. You showed me that it's possible to build something beautiful from terrible circumstances, she told us on their last evening. Your family could have been destroyed by what my mother did, but instead, you became stronger. Pain can do that, Evangeline said. If you let it teach you instead of poison you. I want my children to learn that lesson without having to live through trauma to understand it. Then teach them that choices matter, that love requires sacrifice, that family is about more than blood. Evangeline smiled. Teach them what we learned the hard way. After Clara's family left, our house felt quiet and peaceful. Ophelia was in her room reading, Theodore was working on case files, and Evangeline was knitting by the fireplace. I sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains, thinking about the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. 7 years ago, I would never have imagined that meeting the daughter of our would-be killer could bring such healing. But that's the thing about families. Real families, chosen families, families forged in crisis and bound by love. They have the power to transform even the most terrible circumstances into something meaningful. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Agent Morrison. Elena, I have some news. We've been asked to recommend a family security consulting firm for a high-profile case. A federal judge whose family is being threatened by organized crime. We'll take it. You don't want to know the details first? No. If a family needs protection, we'll protect them. That's what we do. That's why I called you first. After hanging up, I went inside to find Theodore and Evangeline. Tomorrow we would start planning protection for another family in crisis. Tonight, we would simply be grateful for the family we had chosen to become. In the kitchen, I found all three of them working together on a jigsaw puzzle. A massive 2,000-piece mountain landscape that had been their evening project for weeks. How's it coming? I asked. Slowly but surely, Theodore replied. Ophelia found the last corner piece. It was hiding in plain sight, she announced proudly. Sometimes the most important pieces are right where you'd expect them to be. I smiled and joined them at the table, searching through the scattered pieces for the ones that would help complete our picture. Sometimes the most important pieces are indeed right where you'd expect them to be. And sometimes a family burned down and rebuilt from ashes becomes stronger than it ever was before. Outside, snow began to fall on the mountains, covering our valley in a blanket of pristine white. Inside, we worked together by lamplight, fitting the pieces of our puzzle and our lives into place.